In a perfect world, the two are one and the same. You should, ideally, be able to manage and lead in the same breath. That's a concept. We're not there yet, but that's what I worked for.
KEPX presents a Levine Media production. This is Dignity Leadership with hosts Brooke Coleman and Rich Levine.
Welcome to Dignity Leadership. We are so glad you have joined us today.
I'm Rich Levine, Chief Dignity Officer.
And I am Brooke Coleman, Chief Inspiration Officer.
Brooke, how are you?
I'm good.
That was a big sigh.
I know. As I said it, I'm like, I'm good, but I'm a little tired.
That's good, because the last month we did the show, I asked you how you were, and you had a different reaction.
I did.
So you're progressing. You're doing better.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good deal. So, hey, so this year so far, we've had some pretty cool shows.
We have.
We'll talk. The first one was an intro, basically about you and I. We talked about us, which was cool. It was fun.
It was fun.
That was a lot of fun.
I agree.
But then we also talked to, in February, we had a meeting expert on, Linda.
So good, yes.
And then you introduced us to Jaime, and we talked about middle management.
Middle management.
Yeah. And then most recently, we just had a doctor, our first doctor in the house, Dr. Heather.
Yes.
Heather Burton.
She was amazing.
Yes. And we talked about active listening.
Yes.
All right. So you can't use the first show, because in the last show we talked about how we like to talk about ourselves. All right. So you and I did an entire podcast about how we talk about ourselves.
Okay. I just snorted, by the way. I hope we recorded that. Yeah.
And our producers in the background, Kevin E. So Kevin, did you get Did you get the snort? That was too good.
Absolutely.
Not to. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Sweet.
Absolutely.
All right. So
I'll clip that out for you.
All right.
I'm not cool.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, because you know I love to do this. Okay. Can't talk about yourself, so forget about the first show, and you can't talk about me because I'm right here.
Bummer. Okay.
You bummer. Yeah, I'm not that good anyway. So out of those three shows I just mentioned, meeting expert, middle management expert, and active listening.
Sure.
Which one's piqued your interest so far? Don't go favoritism on me, but which one's really got you thinking?
I mean, gosh, that's not hard. That's not even fair. But
I could ask our producer Kevin E. and say, "Hey, Kevin, what's yours?"
Let him
But
think.
then I feel like you're dissing the other guests.
I know, right? I know.
Somebody's going to be saying, why wasn't I thought-provoking?
I know. Excuse me. They've all piqued different.
We're just
areas.
talking about those three shows.
I know.
Yeah.
I think for me, and what it was kind of a call to action. It was active listening. It's that pausing, and here's why. You had mentioned during the last podcast, you kind of brought it back to your vision, right? Your life motto, your vision. And in our first podcast, we kind of shared both of our visions, and what is that, and what does that look like, and how do we get there? And mine is a world where people matter. And it has always been that, but it took years to hone that and to really realize that is what makes me tick. That is what works. And as I listen to that part about active listening and the pause, I'm sitting there going, if it's a world where people matter, I need to know what matters to them. And so that's kind of, I've been chewing on that ever since.
That's awesome. But that also goes into my why statement, right? Learn, grow, lead, create a world of dignity.
Exactly.
So to do dignity, you got to listen, you got to hit all those things. So I know what you're going to say.
Do you?
I'm anticipating, which I was told we're not supposed to do. So you're over there going, Rich, what was yours? So I'll wait.
Hey, Rich.
Yes.
What was yours?
I think having Jaime on.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It was middle management. He glorified middle management.
Yes.
And he did it with class.
He
did.
It
was awesome.
Yeah, first of all, he's an awesome guy, right? And we were able to just see that as he shared that vision, right? Or his passion for it. But the second part that we both noted, and you did, I remember this, was saying, man, but you're so humble about it too. And he was, because he was recognizing that it's never one person. To do that role of manage well, right, where you're being pulled in both directions, you got to really empower the people around you and encourage them and build them up. And he hit that on the nail.
Yeah, and it's a topic that really doesn't come up much in leadership.
Nope.
Everybody skips right over it. And who has, just in my opinion, who has the most influence in an organization because they oversee the most people? It's usually somebody in middle management.
Well, they're the anchors in a lot of ways. I mean, and that's strange, right? Because I just said they're being pulled in both directions. So yeah, you definitely have employees that might be working under you or looking at you. But if you're not towing that line, that balance is off. So you're so needed, and not noticed often.
Yeah. And then when we had Linda Baker on, and we talked to her about strategic leadership and facilitation. Remember, she brought up the analogy about, because I asked her the question, what is strategic leadership? And she said it's chess moves.
Yep.
And then do you remember when I asked her, I said, I started talking about Wayne Gretzky, and she completed the whole thing
Yes,
for me.
I do remember that. I was very impressed. My sports people over there, I don't have any of that.
I was, because I mean, hockey, not a lot of people follow hockey, especially when you're in the heart of Texas. You know.
True, but she's
of course, we
not.
got the Stars are in Texas.
But she clarified she's not from Texas.
Are the Stars
New
in
York.
Texas or the Stars over Texas?
They're deep in the heart of Texas.
Deep in the heart of Texas. There we go.
Deep in the heart of Texas.
So you can sing, I can't, so I'm not even going to go there. And then she hit my heart because she said, when you go bowling is an example of strategic leadership because you have to think about where you're going to throw the ball, where you're going to hit the pin, so one pin will bump or knock over another pin. And I used to own a bowling alley, so yeah.
That's right.
I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was sweet. And then, of course, last month we had Dr. Heather on.
Right.
And we talked about our friendship. Not her friendship and my friendship, but how our friendship circle is.
How it's grown and evolved and changed, right?
Yeah. The circle of life. And we start.
Circle of life.
So go ahead, take it away. You know the song?
And no, we're not
okay,
going to do
all right. All right. So I'm bringing in one of those peeps today for our show.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yes, it's somebody that you and I both met.
Okay.
Go ahead. You were gonna. I interrupted.
Well, I was about to say what our listeners might not realize is that I am coming into these awesome podcasts blind. So I am learning alongside with everybody else what we're talking about, and they're usually experts in their field. We're excited to share with them, but I'm learning as I go. So tell me more.
Tell you more. Well, I just got totally interrupted because as we started recording the podcast, up come the lawnmowers.
Yes, I planned this. They're supposed to come Monday afternoons, not Saturday.
So they're here while we're doing this podcast live. If you're on YouTube or if it's, if you're out there in the world and you hear it again, yeah, there's lawnmowers in the background. It's part of life.
I was about to say that is the
Right
circle
outside.
of life, and right there, right?
They are
Isn't it?
literally outside the window.
Leaf blowers.
It got it all, but it's all part of the deal. So we can go out and yell at them. But what good is that going to do, right?
Well, they're doing their job. So
Yeah.
you keep on doing yours.
Yeah. So we're talking about friendships, coming full circle, and what I wanted to go back and cover is, so if you're a new listener to our show, we kind of changed up the format this year.
Yeah.
And we're doing the intro where you and I are talking back and forth, and then we go into having the guests come on, and then we close it down by going through our why statement.
Right.
What did we learn? How are we going to use it? Who's going to hold us accountable?
Yeah.
Learn, grow, lead, create a world of dignity. But what I didn't tell them, and what you and I had for an aha moment, because different things have come up in your life. You've gotten busier. You're pulling on a bunch of different things. You got a lot of assignments.
Yeah.
You're doing some incredible work with a new startup.
Yep.
But when you and I were prepping to get ready for podcasts, you would ask some incredible questions.
Okay.
And then you come on the show and you wouldn't ask the questions because you already knew the answers to them. So.
Is that okay? That's actually learning moment right here. I was not exactly sure why we had changed the format. Personality wise, I was like, well, this is great. I can do that. I can ask questions.
Yes.
But I wasn't sure why. So that's great feedback because as much of a talker as I see myself as, I have noticed that in groups, sometimes I will sit back and not interject as often. And maybe that's what I was doing. I'm not sure.
And something I've learned over the years is you cannot recreate it. You can't be like, ooh, that was a great question. Ask me that again on the show. You know what I mean?
you
It just
can't
doesn't
do it,
play.
right?
It has to be
Yeah.
organic.
So Kevin and I got together. We had a little Zoom meeting. Maybe it was a text meeting. I don't know. We got back and forth, said, hey, I got this idea, and I haven't told Brooke about it, but let me run it by you. What do you think? And Kevin's like, I love it for that reason right there. And that's exactly what we said. You can't recreate those
Nice.
moments.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
So have I piqued your interest at all? Like who's coming on? What's going on?
Well, I was about to say, who is this person that we both know?
So you remember several months ago, you convinced me to sign up for AYC.
Yes.
And we signed up our organization. So if your listeners out there, that's Austin Young Chamber. And yeah, I know I'm young. We're in it because we're young at heart, and they let us go. They let us do it.
Absolutely.
And you and I met a young gentleman who came up and started talking to us and would just knocked our socks off.
Yes.
know
I
who?
know exactly what we're talking about.
We're talking about Alex Zerbicki. And
Yes.
Alex is a strategic business advisor for Cultivate Advisors. And he's also a serial entrepreneur. So he's after our hearts, right? So after training and learning with some of the brightest minds in the world of corporate finance, private equities, franchising, he now spends his time empowering CEOs and founders to grow their business in a maximal sustainable way. I've even been leaning on him. I'm like, hey, dude, I need some help. I've got life experience, but you've got experience that's in a completely different world. So he's young, he's brilliant, he's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So after working with hundreds of businesses, it became apparent to him that people are the most important factors in a business, successful or otherwise. So he's here today to expand upon a way to qualify and quantify those consequences of leadership within any business model, stage, scale, or industry.
Qualify and quantify.
Told you he's a smart dude. We
Smart
always
guy.
bring on the smartest people
That's right. That's right.
in the world. So without further ado, let's welcome Alex to the show. Welcome to Dignity Live.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's another beautiful Texas summer.
It is. It's nice. Can't complain, although it's always warm. It could be a little chillier
A
sometimes.
little human.
I
All
think
right.
that's the joke he was making.
Maybe. Never mind. Never mind.
So, Alex, I ask every guest I bring on the show this one question.
Okay.
We've got to cover it. So, no funny answers, right? We got to work on be a little more serious here.
Okay.
This is a serious show
Okay.
for serious listeners. What's your definition of leadership?
No.
My serious definition of leadership is the way in which you influence the people around you.
Dang. Very
Concise.
succinct.
Concise. Yes.
All right, so elaborate.
Well, leadership by nature doesn't have a positive or negative connotation, although we only work with people in the positive realm.
Interesting.
Your influence can be up or down, any sort of food chain, any sort of hierarchy. It can be positive or negative. It can be linear. It can undulate. It can do all sorts of things. So for such a broad term, it needs to be defined broadly.
And you have one of the best vocabularies ever. When I sit down and talk to you, you come up with words that I would never think of using. And I love your vocabulary. Undulate.
Thanks, man. That's really flattering. I appreciate that.
That is, you bring them out. So for all the listeners out there that do not know what undulate means, what is undulate?
It fluctuates, goes up and down in a systematic or not way.
All right,
It's
cool.
not linear.
It's not linear.
Not linear.
So he defined it, but it was perfect.
Yeah.
So help us understand, or help our listeners understand, what is a strategic business advisor? So what do you do?
That's a great
Yeah.
answer, yeah, or a great question. I am a glorified version of a consultant. I work with CEOs and entrepreneurs. I help them quantify first their entire business model that usually has to do with cash flow, financial literacy, FP&A/CFO functions, these types of things. And then I empower them to work outward from that cash flow model to every strategic decision they have to make, armed with data, right? So you need to hire a new person. Great. What is the projected ROI on that position? What resources do we have to allocate in order to recruit, interview, hire, train, and effectively lead that person? How does that fold into our model? Can we do that in March? Can we do that in next March? Can we do that never? Can we do that tomorrow? And that's just an example, right? That branches to sales, marketing, leadership, recruiting, productivity, et cetera, et cetera.
Dang.
Wow.
Wow is right. Mind blown. So one of the things I talk about or have done research on with my leadership stuff is the difference between management and leadership. And management for me it's all about the numbers, it's spreadsheets, it's the task-oriented stuff. And what I hear you saying, so I'm going to use my active listening skills I learned in last month's episode. What I hear you saying is that you're taking these numbers and you're basically turning them into, you're speaking to them in a language that they can understand, because most CEOs are a dominant type. They're about the numbers. They want to make sure they hit their profits, loss, all that good stuff, keep their expenses in line. And you're using that so they understand where you're coming from, but then you're kind of flipping it to leadership. So you're kind of talking to them in the management spectrum, but you're like, wait a second, we got to get this into leadership. Is that fair? Am I close?
That is fair, yeah. And I would say that in a perfect world, the two are one and the same. You should, ideally, be able to manage and lead in the same breath. That's a concept. We're not there yet, but that's what I work toward.
That's a utopia.
Agreed, sir. Agreed.
Okay.
Well, what would that look like?
That would be melding the quote-unquote soft skills of leadership and tying them to the bottom line figures that everybody's concerned about, right? That's saying, for instance, I've heard all of these anecdotes, right? The labor force is a tumultuous place right now in America's economy. I've heard several anecdotes about, walk in and ask for a raise and boss says, oh, well, if I could pay everybody $100 an hour, I would. Why is he throwing that number out? He's clearly not informed, right? That person isn't jumping to that number because it's rooted in fact. That is colloquial. It's probably hyperbole. He probably has no idea what he could actually pay everybody. So it's taking the deliverable that is the financial data, right? Inputs and outputs, and then marrying that to how do we create a symbiotic environment for business entity, management / leadership, and the employee? How do we meet that with the interests of each individual within the company?
So I think I was thinking about this a little bit as you were even saying that, and I had a question. I needed to stop because I wanted to hear what you were saying, and you hit on both. Because in that same breath, right? Can it be one and the same? And the answer is yes, ideally. Is that a person or is that an organization? Is that an entity?
Boy, howdy. That's a big question, Brooke. and I would say that the answer can be any one or two or three of those things, right? I'm sure either or both of y'all can recall times when you were in an organization or a team that was toxic, perhaps cancerous, but there might have been a shining light. There might have been one person, a leader or a frontline worker, who you were like, that person, yes, I resonate with your messaging, with your outlook, with your deliverable of communication, what have you. So it could be an individual.
Sure.
It could be a team. It could be a leader. It could be an entity. The utopia that we're talking about is workplace culture. So I would go even a fourth tier, right?
Okay.
But in practice, it does exist, albeit rarely. It does exist in each of those first three variables that you threw out there. But the goal would be to systematize it and then show that it prospers, right? It is my opinion that the reason that several archaic old school management tactics still exist is because some people somewhere still think they yield profit.
They can still work.
Not even they can still work, that they will yield the
profit.
best like numeric results. And I am here to contend that. And I do that with all of my clients, with everybody I talk to. I will shout it from the rooftops, and I'm here to talk about it today.
All right.
So it's probably fair to say that most business owners, regardless of size, want higher profits. They want higher sales.
That's fair.
They want more productivity.
Yeah.
They want customer loyalty. And so you're gonna advocate on our side to say, look, stop being jerks. Maybe start taking care of people. God, I love this. Again, I love you, man.
Love you too, buddy. And again, the messaging is fragmented, right? Because so many folks who I've talked to and or worked with or under are thinking like, I can either take care of my people or be this hard-driving, old-school, profit-driven person. And my message is that you can and should do both. You should chase metrics, and you should also effectively and empathetically lead your people.
All right, you ready for a crazy stat?
Lay it
You
out.
know I love stats.
You love stats.
So the global talent shortage is almost double right now what it was 10 years ago.
Wow.
In research, according to Catalyst.org, that by 2030, talent shortages will significantly impact the financial and business services in the U.S. to a tune of almost $450 billion. Now, here's where it gets even crazier. So they did a list of the top 10 markets where this is going on. The next closest one on the list, was China at 150 billion. Almost $300 billion left. That's the shortfall in the U.S. So my message is, and it sounds like you're advocating with it, and Brooke and I's message is, stop treating people like crap. Start taking care of them. So let's go back to your entrepreneurial consulting and what you do. So what does it look like for you when you go into, let's say, a small shop, 5,
Day
10,
one.
15, 20, 30.
Yeah.
What's your perspective? What do you do? What do you look for? How do you help them?
So we take a very diagnostic approach, right? Anybody who would consider themselves a coach or an expert or a consultant cannot walk in and just start spewing information, right? You have to take in information. So when I walk in day one, I really try to, in a granular, detailed sense, understand exactly how the operation works, right? We start high level and then we drill down. For instance, business owner, what are you chasing? What are your goals? Is it a profit margin? Is it an exit strategy? Is it a prestige or reach or head count or whatever? And we talk about the broad direction. And then we reverse engineer back to, okay, what are we operating at right now? How does that tie to your goals? Does it tie to your goals? And then we drill down even further to who's on your team? What are they doing? How are you distributing these costs, revenues, profits, conversion rates, productivity metrics, blah, 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 across whatever team you have. And I work with a few solopreneurs, right? So sometimes they're wearing all the hats, but sometimes we've got some larger teams. I think my largest client has something like 120 employees. So, mid to smaller market is where I live for the most part. That being said, that small to mid market covers the entire spectrum that we've talked about of data-based hard driving management versus empathetic leadership and everything in between.
So you got to have it, right? You got to have the empathetic leadership.
You have to have it, yes, and it's a skill, as all of you well know, right? Listening to the last episode, which I very much enjoyed as well. You can't turn on and turn off instantly active listening. Same way you can't turn on and turn off empathy, which is a personality trait, by the way, or leadership, which is a broader, in the Venn diagram, that's outside of empathy, right? And so you have to have it, but grace must be given because we're coming out of some archaic and less than ideal paradigms of how to actually push people forward. We're not in the Industrial Revolution anymore. We're not driving cattle. We're not driving horses. Like we're trying to do something a little more human, a little smarter.
But when you go back and you look at what's going on in the world and you start reading about it, so many people believe that we're still in that Industrial Revolution time. But we're past that, we're so far. But yet they have these, number one, organizational structure. Having a hierarchy came from the Industrial Revolution. And then the way they treat people, you talk about numbers and how do you squeeze more out. So those things I just rattled off a minute ago, higher profits, higher sales, more productivity, customer loyalty, that is what they wanted in the Industrial Revolution. They still want that now. But what we're advocating for is saying, all right, how do we strip out the jerk factor from somebody? And how do we use, you said it, empathy. You got something, Brooke?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. This conversation is fantastic. But I think the question comes down to, if we're coming in, by we, I actually mean you, Alex, you're going in, consulting, listening, gathering all this information, but you just mentioned so many of those different components that all have to come together. And empathy, you hit on, just like active listening, is a skill. Skills, and this is a conversation we had last time too, and we've had it multiple times on our podcast. These skills are often not naturally born skills. These are acquired and learned. And so I'm curious, as we're building this, and you're right, we're no longer in the Industrial Revolution, and we are coming out of something crazy right now that is going to change the history books. The future will look so different. Right now, I think it's so murky. No, there aren't very many people that have a clear vision of what that looks like, because it's in a good way, but a hard way has uprooted a lot of stuff, right? So people are navigating a little bit of chaos. You get out of that though, and you go back to empathy is something that should have been there, needs to be there, and will need to be there in the future. How do you bring that into the business model that you are helping these guys build?
A great question, and I will say that there is no one size fits all answer here, right?
No, absolutely right. Yeah.
Like doing this for 5 employees versus 100 is very different. But I'll say this: it is tying employee autonomy, creativity, satisfaction, fulfillment into the profit model. And that's something that a lot of folks don't do. And that's something that I, in particular, pride myself on. And I know I have plenty of my teammates at my firm share that sentiment, where if you look at it all as cold objective numbers, a productivity metric is not an employee fulfillment metric.
Yeah.
But
yes,
they have your employees are, the better productivity they have.
Absolutely.
And it's not transactional. You're not outside the grocery store putting a nickel in the rocking horse and waiting for it to do its job. It's we are going to run together toward this objective.
What universe do you live in that you can put a nickel in a rocking horse? Because I'm older than you, and my kids were growing up. We had to put 50 cents in there, so I want to find this nickel.
Where is this rocking horse these days?
Is it a unicorn? Is it a unicorn?
It might be. I'm thinking of I'm from Detroit. I'm thinking of grocery stores back in the Midwest. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Oh man.
No, that's good stuff. But so you're talking, we're going back and forth with comparing stuff to the Industrial Revolution. And John D. Rockefeller, bless his heart, guy's got more money than God, or had more money than God. He's dead now. But he put out a quote, and it drives me crazy. And I think it's what's got us into this pickle we're in right now and trying to figure it out. And he said, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. And that was during the Industrial Revolution. If you look at what are we taught when we go through school? Work hard, right? Work hard, get a job, put your money in the bank. Yeah. Is the bank the best investment? We're not going to get an investment ship. But that mentality, you take that mentality, hey, you're supposed to work hard, work hard. All right, now we're outgoing. And these, we're going to call them youngsters because they're younger than me, but millennials make up the biggest part of the workforce right now. And I'm going to pull out some more crazy stats for you.
Lay it on me.
So McKinsey & Company did some research. They're a $10 billion management company. And in 2021, they did a survey of a boatload of employees. Came back that 66% of the people they surveyed, workers they surveyed, said that they were reevaluating their job and their purpose in life as a result of the disruption from COVID. But they also reported in that same research that millennials were 3 times more likely to rethink their current situation than any other generation. So what this boils down to is we got a crap ton of people that are looking at their bosses right now and going, I don't like you. I don't like working for you. You don't inspire me.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem, I would say.
How do you quantify that? I did earlier with one number, but so if you're sitting in and you're coaching somebody, they want to pull you in, and they aren't going to pull that out, but you're talking to them, what's your biggest problem? They're probably going to come out. They might now say, hey, well, employees are running out the door. You know what? Call Dignity Leadership. Here's the guy and gal's name you need to get, Brooke and Rich, and then
I actually show them your picture,
and that'll scare them away. Don't just show them my
pictures
logo
of their kids in their wallet. I've just got you and your logo in my wallet. Stunning, really.
Stunning.
So
stop it.
So getting to your point, you're right. Nobody poses that question. I've never ever had a business owner say, how do I my employees aren't fulfilled? How do I fulfill nobody asks that question.
They want to know how they fulfill their order sheet, right?
100%. But it usually becomes a question of either productivity or retention or both, right? Anecdotally speaking, you'll hear, or I will hear, I can't seem to keep employees. I'm like, really? Why do you think that is?
Have you looked in the mirror?
Yeah, right. And you'll get a lot of the generational thing, right? These kids
millennials don't know how to
work. Yeah, right, exactly. Show up, do your job. And while as a sentiment that may have a little bit of validity, my question is normally okay, what's your exit interview process? What are you asking them when they leave? What are they telling you when they leave? Do you care? Are you just letting them leave? Are you getting a 2 weeks notice and being like, hey, bye, woe is me, I have to go recruit the next person? Talk to them. Yeah. Sit them down.
You bring that up, you talk about exit interviews, and I know a hot trend going on right now, or starting to, we'll see how far it makes it all the way through the rest of the year in 2022, is this thing that they're calling, quote unquote, stay interviews. So they're asking people, they're setting up interviews with their employees to say, hey, why are you still here? And there was an article that was written and it was posted on LinkedIn. You guys all know I'm pretty active on there. And the author posted this article. I challenged the author on LinkedIn. And I said, why did you choose the word interview? Because interview has a negative connotation. People think an interview is something they have to do. It also goes back to what we said earlier about hierarchy. Somebody in an interview has to be in control. If I'm interviewing you, unless you're really good, so you'd probably be able to turn it on me and turn it around to interview me. But with most people, it's the interviewer controls the interviewee. So they're asking for this feedback, but they're controlling the conversation. It's like, come on. So I challenged them, and we'll see what happens. We'll see if we're making any waves and see if anybody will rethink this. But, doing a negative interview. So maybe if I could ever help, you've helped me a ton. So when you walk in there, sometimes say, hey, why are you doing an exit interview? Because if we have routine conversations,
Right.
like we do as friends, and we start giving feedback. You and I talked about this on the last episode last month. It's giving the feedback back and forth. And you said, hey, I got some feedback from you. That's because we can do that. Now, just think how powerful that would be if we could do that with our employees. If you would, you can do it. If you would do it with your employees.
I think I call this a different thing.
What do you call it?
Like a stay interview. I would call that, ready, drum roll, a one-on-one. I would call that a one-on-one meeting. Your manager should be sitting down with your employees who are doing a good job and who have stayed a long time. And it doesn't have to be every one-on-one. It doesn't have to be every week. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't even have to be every month. But at some point, you should probably say, you're really great. Why do you keep doing such a great job? And that's something that I fold into the leadership bucket, right? That should be done as a standard meeting practice. Yeah.
So I got a client that I'm working with one-on-ones. And this client is struggling with her boss. And they introduced the idea, and it happened organically, and they started having one-on-one meetings. And the boss, we're going to refer him as boss, emailed the team, and there's a handful, I think there's only 4 on the team. It's a pretty small team. And my client is one of them, and said, hey, I want you to go out to my calendar and put a 30-minute one-on-one meeting. We'll do this once a week or every other week. I think it's every other week. So I was asking my client, I said, how's this going? Well, it almost gets canceled every time.
Oh, no.
I said, really? So here's an opportunity. They're going through the right thing, or they'll get on the phone and her boss will be, what do you want to talk about today? And she's opening up the conversation. But if my client doesn't do anything, they go, okay, well, if we don't have anything to talk about, we'll just wait for 2 weeks. No, you've got somebody there. Figure out a way to engage that person to have a conversation.
Well, is that not maybe something that's been brought up from the top down? It sounds like if you're coming in and saying, all right, what do you want to talk about today? It means that you probably weren't the one that really instigated this from the beginning. And I was just thinking about this, Alex and Rich. What about middle management in this sense? Because so a one-on-one, it's so critical and it's so necessary. But when you're putting so much on this one person, this expectation that this middle manager needs to do all of these things, the analytics, understanding just the pace and the pulse of everything that's going on, plus take care of your staff, plus take care of your employees, plus let's start doing these one-on-ones because they're valuable and people value them, right? How do you go about balancing that, though? How is that done well?
Quantify that for us.
Quantify that for us. So, when you want to quantify anything, you ask somebody what's in it for you, right? So I would ask the boss of your client. I would say, why are you doing this? You checking a box? Is it so you get a good grade?
I don't get a talk. I could coach my client to say, go ask your boss, why are we doing this?
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
In like that, there will likely not be a transparent answer to that question.
True.
But you just hit something really important. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
It's why. Why determines purpose. Yeah. When you understand what the purpose is behind something, then people will start to begin to have an engaging conversation.
So I have a story. I have a client, and it was a client who has struggled with employee retention. And she says, I systematically check in with my employees, right, bi-weekly, but it's similar to that, right? So she says, I systematically check in with my employees. I was like, great, what do you say? How do those meetings go? Do you have a script? Do you have a worksheet? What do we do here? She's like, yeah, I ask them, how's it going? Need anything? We good? Move on. And she's like, I don't get it, because then 6, 8, 12, 15 weeks later, they quit. I was like, well, why are you having these meetings? She's like, so they don't quit. I was like, what do you need to know so that an employee won't quit? She's like, well, and I'm not going to give away industry, but she said, this, and this question. I was like, make a worksheet, put that in your one-on-one, ask these specific questions, right? Like, are you struggling with anything in this specific element of your job? Have you come across this specific problem? Are you feeling lost in this category of your gradable KPI workplace expectation, whatever? And specificity can be disingenuous, but it also can be genuine, right? And that's what leads to the feedback, because whether you're an empath or not, whether you have the skill of empathy or not, there is still value in that feedback. And then how do you quantify that? I say, what does it cost you when they leave? I'll tell you. I'll get right down into your spreadsheet, and I will let you know to the dollar how much that costs you. And we're going to try to avoid that. That's how much that's the value to you.
So you want to know what's scary about that?
Lay it on me.
Is I got more crazy stats. And these actually go back.
Great.
These are from 2019, so it's a little bit pre-pandemic. But so Deloitte did a study, and they actually just looked at millennials, but they gave the top 3 reasons why they want to leave their job. And 43% of those that reported said it was dissatisfaction with their pay and benefits. So bam, right there. Okay. So this person that you're coaching or your client might not have control of that, but she could report it back to whoever's holding the purse strings or HR department, right? 35% of them stated there's not enough advancement opportunities. That's probably squarely on the boss's, your client's shoulders. What are you doing to help these people grow, learn, and become better leaders? What are you doing? And then 28% of them said it was due to a lack of learning and development. Now, I know those numbers don't total up to 100% because they could pick multiple answers. But those are the biggest categories. So right there it is. They don't like their pay. They don't like their opportunities. And you're not developing them. So right there, let's get this going. Let's come up with the business plan right now. How are we going to do this? Just kidding.
How are we going to solve those 3 problems? Is that the question you're posing to me?
No, how are we going to get dignity leadership into more businesses so we can actually go out and lead, grow, create a world of dignity, and actually have these guys have higher profits, higher sales, customer loyalty, and customer retention.
You're going to quantify your operation. You're going to quantify your operation, because
that's what they want.
I think this was
the people
conversation on day 1, by the way. Let's just take it back.
we started with something like this, but it has become like dignity leadership has become something bigger. The great resignation of 2020.
Changed, yes.
Yeah. So like workplace trends, labor force trends, and personal like people in this room growth has changed the conversation. But how do we get dignity leadership in? To answer your question, you have to educate, you have to speak the language of those who don't think they need you, right? They don't need some dang hippies telling them how to lead, right?
Are you calling me a hippie?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean that as a term of endearment, my friend.
Surprise, Rich.
Yeah.
I've never been called a hippie before.
But you must speak their language, and their language is bottom line. So how does this translate to your bottom line? I will tell you in the last 2 years how much lack of employee retention, employee dissatisfaction has cost you in terms of productivity as well as employee turnover. Again, costs of recruiting, interviewing, hiring, training versus, okay, so you're going to tell me that it takes, and I'm going to make up arbitrary numbers, none of these matter, but it takes $100K to replace a middle manager or even higher, right? But you're not willing to give that same middle manager a $30K raise, which is big, by the way. A 30% raise is huge, but it is nothing compared to the cost of going and hiring another employee. And so if you can lean in with this person who's already trained and bend over backwards, meet them where they're at, whatever, that solves the biggest statistical problem that you just outlined from Deloitte.
And I think some of these other issues, I was working with another client and I was going through their HR policies with some of their number policies. Yeah. And the question came up was, I was giving them a raise. And so if you take your number of 100,000, let's just say the middle management employees making 100,000. They got a great salary, a great job. They're kicking butt. They're doing well. They're
Millennials are pretty happy with that one. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Well, anybody would. Most people should be. So you say 30,000. That's a 30% increase. So I'm working with this company, and they tell me that they got a people first plan. That's their philosophy, and that's what they do, and that comes down from HR. Everybody's saying people first, people first, people first. I'm working with one of the managers, and I said, hey, tell me about this Alex guy you got. He said, oh, he's great. I'm trying to get him a raise. I said, okay, what do you want to get him to? I can't get him any more than 10%. I said, what do you mean? Well, I've got to have the CFO, and I got to have the president, and I got to have the COO all sign off on that. Really? Marched my happy little butt down to HR, and I said, hey, can we give somebody a 15%? Well, yeah, but we got to do. I said, time out. Yeah, but you said you have a people first plan, but you got to go through all these hoops to do it. That's not a people first plan. That's a bottom line first plan. You care about the dollars. Now, I get we just can't arbitrarily go and give people stuff, but if you make it difficult, and that's what I think these hierarchies do, is they make it so freaking convoluted and difficult to do it that people just give up, and they start giving BS answers to their people. Well, I can't give you that. Why? Because it's going to take me an hour and a half just to explain to you why I can't do it.
And I would argue that is a value statement, right? Like, they do not see the value in retaining this employee. They do not see the value in going through all the processes and the red tape and the bureaucracy and you name it to keep or further this employee's career with the company. And that's where the bottom line conversation starts to come in. You have to show them the value in the way that they see it or the way that they will resonate with it. Some people, that's employee fulfillment, but most people, it's bottom line.
So are you experiencing the trend right now, the Great Resignation? Are you seeing this with your clients?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're in the thick of it. And I have a good relationship with many people on my team at Cultivate, and most of their clients are going through it as well.
Interesting.
And it comes down to, we start with quantification. We start with cash flow model. So it does have to start with that when you want to talk about it in a pragmatic sense or in a conventional business sense. But it works its way out to, what are you actually paying for here? Are you paying for an increase in productivity? Are you paying to not incur a loss in productivity, right? If you get a 6-person organization and one leaves and then one has to hire the new person, you've cut your labor force by 1/3. You think your bottom line's gonna stay the same? Good luck.
Yeah, good luck is right. So we got to retain our talent pool, right? So, you got a question over there, Brooke?
Well,
Look
we're going to have to wrap up soon and change gears. However, as we've talked about this and just thinking about what you do, I want to hear a win. I want to hear just a story from like start to end about like the change that was done, within a system and why and how and what it looks like today.
Yeah.
Would that be okay if we ended at that?
Absolutely.
All right, cool.
Of course. You know what we have a plan is so we know where we left off.
That's
so next
right.
time we have to come back, we know what we need to cover.
Absolutely.
So yes, go with it.
Okay.
Great. So beginning to end. Great. So I have this client. I'm not going to reveal industry or any name or anything like that.
Please don't.
Yeah. So this person figured out a way to very uniquely create multiple revenue streams in an industry that, candidly, I knew nothing about before I worked with them. What we work in business agnostic or industry agnostic type of realm. So I get in. He's got this small team. He's running a shop, producing his goods out of a small warehouse space, more revenue than he knows how to handle. And I walk in, and he's like, I feel like I'm fielding hostility. I'm fielding angst from all of my teammates. And he's like, I don't understand why they won't just shut up and work, right? Like we just said. Right. And I was like, great. Can I talk to him?
Yeah.
Can I go talk to him? And not one. There was a team of, when we started, I want to say 8. So there was the owner, my client, and 8 people on the team.
Wow.
And not a single one of them could tell me their job description.
Oh, wow.
How are you going to be good at something if you don't know what it is that you're doing?
Yeah,
right?
if you don't know what you're supposed to do.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was the spearhead of all sorts of discontent and problems, right? And so I go back to my client, I tell him this, and the win was, we stepped back, we zoomed out, we climbed up into the crow's nest, and we said, what is a list, a comprehensive list of all of the tasks that need to be done? and we put them out on a whiteboard, and then we put them in sequential order, right? So operationally speaking, beginning to end from when they field or see a lead to finishing their process and delivering their product. And we broke out, okay, who owns that? And plenty of them had their inefficiencies, right? To put it succinctly, plenty of them had 2 or 3 people owning one task, and like, oh, well, this person can do this part, and this person can do this part. And then there were plenty of them where it's like, I don't really know who owns that part. And so all of this is to say, in my opinion, the first step to a win is clarity of task, right? So if I say, Rich, you've got to make this here widget, and this is how you make this widget, and you're going to be graded on this widget. And you're like, well, I want to make spreadsheets. We're like, well, maybe you shouldn't be in the widget job, right? But you fit that to the exact production line. And then you start to fit in KPIs, which are still important, right? Your workplace expectations, and you say, here, we need you to make 100 widgets a week, whatever. And then you start to ask, do you like making widgets? Is this easy? Do you want to make more widgets? Do you eventually want to teach people to make widgets, right? So from the job description element, it then parlays itself from completely pragmatic and process-oriented to wholly empathetic and inquisitive and curious, right? And again, this is where we marry the two. And you say, I need this job done. Do you like this? Can you do this? Do you want to do this forever? Do you want to do this for 6 months? And so on. And those conversations between, stay in your lane, do your job, but also, how you doing? You okay? You would
just to care about people?
Yeah, you would be amazed what those types of conversations can do. And what we did was, and he had more money than he knew what to do with. They needed triple the amount of employees that they had when I started there, and he was just working them like dogs, right? Like they were just exhausted, pissed off by every measure of the phrase. And so we allocated funds for cash flow for new hiring. We strategically decided where the first people needed to be hired, opening up bandwidth of other key people. Then the wheel starts to spin just a little bit, and then cash flow yields more hires and more resources and so on and so forth. And that comes along with a lot of other homework, right? I'm romanticizing and generalizing, but that comes along with price analysis, payroll analysis, recruiting analysis, right? There's a lot of data that goes into this. But my point is the utopia winning version, right, that we've talked about today is clarity of role, clarity of process, checking in personally, and then figuring out in order of priority where we need to help from a cash flow and personal resource, human resources standpoint. And now it runs like a well-oiled machine. And I candidly, early on, I had questions if it ever would. But it turns out that all we needed to do was strategically reinvest. We had to care, and we had to specifically define.
Nice. Okay.
I'm glad you asked that question, because it wasn't what I had for the ending, but you know what? It worked out. It was awesome. I love that answer.
Thank you so much.
So we need to start winding this down. So Alex, thank you for coming on today, sharing your wisdom with us. I think I took some notes. I picked up some new words for my vocabulary. I'm going to start a word of the day. And then when I run out of them, I'm going to Alex for them. So thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. This was great.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, so let's wind this bad boy down. Kevin E., are you paying attention over there? You've been super quiet on this podcast today.
I check in and out,
So you were checked out.
Yes.
You're checked out. So you know what we do? We're at the end of the show, right? So my favorite question, what'd you learn today?
Well, first of all, what I learned is, quite frankly, I don't want to be a solopreneur anymore. I don't think. I really think I want to really increase revenue and productivity. I need to expand, basically.
So what did Alex say that triggered that loose, that jarred that loose?
I think almost most of it came from his last story.
Dang,
basically,
that last story, bingo.
That was really good. And I don't need to have 8 people underneath me to get something like that started. I need like 2 people underneath me. But now that I know that you can reinvest and redefine those specific skills and what needs to be done, and it will run much more smoothly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good point. How about you, Rich? What did you learn?
I think the biggest piece is it drives me crazy how everybody we talk to, when we're fielding questions, it's all about the bottom line. But
Yeah.
just learning from Alex how to quantify that, like you said. All right, so talk their language.
Yeah.
I know what I want, and they know what they want. I want more leaders. I want better people. I want people to be treated well. And it goes back to what I learned a long, long time ago. Even Zig Ziglar said it. You got to help enough other people do what they want, and then you'll get what you want in return. So I want to help people grow as leaders, but I got to slow myself down and say, all right, let's quantify this for you. What does it look like? All right, what problems do you have, and what does it look like? And I mean, I don't want to redo my business model or anything, but I can take pieces of that away. Yeah, I want to teach leadership. That's my goal.
Right.
It's in the title. But that's what I learned. I got to learn how to listen better, going back to what we learned last month, and then tie that into quantifying this. What does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
And qualifying it.
Right. So yeah, that would be my takeaway, is the finesse between qualifying and quantifying. And that is seared in my brain from day one, from talking to you. It was that you just, the questions you came up with, and that you just naturally go to, it makes you look at a business model, or even think about whatever you're looking at a little bit differently, and realize those two things don't have to be enemies of each other. And we've created that environment that it's like, nope, it's one or the other. They oppose each other. Or it's like this kind of scarcity thought of like, well, here's my bottom line. This is the profits I'm making. So there's no way I can bring somebody else in. What if we looked at the model differently? What if we stepped back? What if we actually went to the bottom line and looked at how to quantify each of those key components, and did it as we talk to our people, and as we encourage them, and as we train them up? And to your point, that is building leadership. That's leadership right there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so it can be done in so many ways. But I will say, when I think about quantifying it, and I can only imagine, I'm not the only one out there, it feels daunting and overwhelming. And so people shut down. That's where you shut the door. You're like, nope, can't do it. And yet I walk away, no joke, I mean, always inspired by you, Alex. You're talking about these things and I'm like, oh, it can be done. Like it absolutely can be. It's a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm exactly in that phase right now where I'm like,
Yeah.
what is the next step,
Yeah.
For a large fee, I'm sure Alex is available for
I don't think I can afford him.
I don't know if any of us can. He's good at what he does. That's part of being, when you're good, you can charge a lot of money. I'm not even know what he
you're
charges.
good.
I just buy him some beers and a couple steaks here and there. And then I ask him some brilliant questions along the way. And then he goes home feeling good, feeling satisfied. And he thinks he had a great time. I'm going home with knowledge. I'm going home with a bigger vocabulary. Checkbook's a little lighter, but it wouldn't be as probably. For me, it's kind of cool because my wife and I were talking about this, the whole relationship, and I said, God, I love spending time with Alex because I always learn something. And I looked at her square in the eye, and I was dead serious. I said, you know what? I said, me buying him a steak dinner and a couple of drinks is probably a hell of a lot cheaper than me going, hey, Alex, I need 1 hour of your time. What's it going to cost?
Absolutely.
He's like, bust out your credit card. But that's the power of friendship. So we talked about that in the last one.
I get all kinds of free info. We're doing this job, so
He's just taking notes over here. It's awesome.
You are doing, you do well.
I get a lot of people coming through here with a lot of good stuff to say.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, who's got the best stuff in the company? No, don't answer.
Ooh.
Don't answer.
No.
Don't
Stop,
answer.
stop.
Don't
All right,
answer.
all right.
Don't answer that. We're not going there. We're going to leave that in there, but not go there. All right. So we gotta wind this down. What was your favorite takeaway from today? Anything, Kevin, with Alex?
My favorite takeaway. First of all, the word that immediately pops in my head is quantifying.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys
It's powerful.
applied that to so many different things, and it's not something that I ever think about, though.
I don't see. I think I used to come from the quantifying metric where at work I was in the corporate environment. I had to quantify everything. I was putting it on spreadsheets. Like, got to record it. If it's not on the spreadsheet, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're
And
much more that way than I am.
But
with stuff like that.
I've been pushing myself so hard to get so far away from that to go more towards the people. And then we sit down, we have a conversation with Alex. It's like, yes, you can get there, but you got to quantify it because that's the language they
And
understand.
I don't think I quantify anything. I'm not good at it. Something definitely I need to explore.
I'm going to have to practice on that. So who's going to hold you accountable to who's going to be your accountability partner?
Ooh, for this one?
Yeah. It can be the same as on the last month's show too. I mean, I won't charge you too much
Someone's
money.
put it in a silent plug
I
there, so go
overall
ahead.
want to say, I just overall want to say like my clients, but I know that's kind of
Yeah.
a broad answer and kind of obvious, but
But who's going to meet
your
you and ask you, hey, how are you doing on this? Like, actually bring that up. Not just your clients because they're your clients, but say, hey, this was something that was really important to you. How are you doing with this?
Okay, then I'm going to use Rich again. Then that's
All
two
right.
birds because he's also a client.
Well, there you go. Winner, winner.
And your client group, I mean, you're good. You have a lot of clients, but that is a isolated select group of people.
Yes.
So you have quantified
And
it.
I want to have one-on-ones now. That's another thing I want to do. I want to have one-on-ones and know why my client retention, the one that I do have, why are they staying, you know? Or how could I
You know
improve?
what? That is brilliant. That is brilliant. I'm glad we could help you.
Yeah, definitely.
So the next hour is free. It's sponsored by Dignity Leadership. We're going to be here on KEPX. Oh, just sorry. So Brooke,
Yeah.
what was your favorite part of today with Alex?
It was really good. I have a hard time. I'm always like processing later after our conversation.
Yeah, I do that too.
Right? So, definitely, yeah, the qualifying over quantifying. I mean, without a doubt. But it wasn't a direct thing that was said. It's just but as we're talking about these pieces, and to your point, you're like, yeah, I used to come from that world. And Kevin is saying, well, that was not me. Well, that is not me, right? People
don't wanna do
person
any of that.
first, right? And then numbers. Do I care about the forecasting? Do I care about the aggregate level? Absolutely. Do I want to know what the bottom line is? Yes. Do I want to do the math for that? No. So, but you could. So here's what I thought. Like, there's a strength in like the two parts of that, That's what I kept on thinking of, because one person sometimes can drive the entire ship, but you're usually stronger if there's just a few more, right? Like what is it? That cord of three is so much stronger than just one. There's a saying there that maybe I'll figure out for next time.
There is. I don't remember it either.
My
I don't know.
English is
Say
not
it to us
so
in
bueno,
Spanish.
¿ah?
Say it to us in
No,
Spanish.
es que no sé cómo decirlo ni en español ni en inglés. I don't know. I don't know how to say it in
gotcha.
either. I will figure it out, but I know that it's something about the strength.
Yep.
That was my takeaway, my favorite. What was it? What's the second question that I should know?
What, on this one?
Uh-huh.
What would you like was a favorite, and then how are you going to use this
How am I
opportunity,
gonna
or
use
who's going
it?
to hold you accountable? Either one. So who's going to hold you accountable?
Okay,
or how
so
are you
here's
gonna
the
use
hard thing about holding accountable. We're saying this, you have to ask somebody if they'd be willing to hold you accountable. Like, would you be in a symbiote? Like, would you be willing to have this conversation, and to hold me accountable to this? So I have somebody in mind, but I'm going to go ask them. So I'm not going to say it yet because that's just weird. But
that's strategic on my part,
oh, I know. But
because it forces you to have a conversation,
oh, okay, all right. Well, I appreciate that.
and then it opens the door.
Okay. So yes. So I do know who's going to hold me accountable.
Yeah.
But we have to ask them first.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, without
Cool.
a doubt.
Awesome. What about you?
What do you mean? What about me?
You have 30 seconds
For what?
to say wait, did you already say
Buffalo Plaid was my favorite part.
Buffalo by Ralph Lauren?
By Ralph Lauren.
He didn't say who his accountable person is.
I
did
know,
he?
that's what I mean. You didn't answer the question.
I want to go back to yours and what you just said about having the one-on-ones.
Yeah, I can't stop thinking about that now.
Instead of you doing it with an employee, do it with
Yes.
clients.
There you go. Okay.
You blew my mind.
Absolutely.
So Kevin is going to hold me accountable.
So what was your favorite? How are you going to use that? And then who are you going to keep accountable?
all right,
Kevin
so
E?
I'm not going to, it's not going to be about Alex this time. Sorry. It's going to be about Kevin E. And his
Nice.
favorite was the transition, making the leap from employees one-on-one to client
That's
one-on-one,
cool.
because we're both in the same space.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part.
And I know it's a different relationship between client.
I love
It's
that.
totally- employee,
It's
but-
totally different.
Yeah.
But it was powerful.
It's equally, I think you can apply it the same way.
Yes, you can.
This
Absolutely.
I love this, guys. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
No, it's pretty awesome. This
Yeah.
was one of our better ones.
Yeah, this was
Yeah.
fun.
So take us home, Brooke.
All right. Hey, thank you so much for joining us on our leadership journey today.
Keep paddling.
Keep paddling.